All right, so today we're going to dive into something that could be a real game changer if you're a Nepali student thinking about studying in Australia.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. We're looking at this thing called Level 2 assessment for student visas,
Yeah.
which Australia gives to Nepal.
Ah,
We've got some really interesting information on what that actually means and how it could really make things easier for you as a student if you're thinking about going global with your education.
okay.
And the goal here is to break it all down, make it clear, what does this actually mean for you
Right.
without, getting bogged down in all the bureaucratic jargon.
Yeah, all the stuffy details.
Exactly. So to start off,
Sure.
Australia has this system where they kind of assess the risk associated with international students, from different countries.
Yeah, they're basically trying to figure out how likely it is that someone might overstay their visa or, maybe not follow all the rules.
Right, exactly. And a level 2 assessment means they see Nepal as a pretty low-risk country.
Yeah. Low risk basically means they have a good amount of trust in Nepali students.
Okay, so low risk.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean if you're, a student from Nepal who's like, hey, I want to go study in Australia?
Well, it could mean a much smoother process when you're applying for your student visa.
All right.
And probably the most important part, it means you have a better chance of actually getting that visa approved.
So less stress and more chance of success.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's break it down even further.
Right.
What does this easier process actually look like, for someone actually applying?
Okay, so first off, you're probably going to need less paperwork.
No, that's nice.
Right, especially compared to students from countries that are considered higher risk, and they're not going to scrutinize your application as intensely.
So they're not going to examine every little detail with a magnifying glass.
Exactly. It basically shows that the Australian government has a good amount of trust in Nepali students right from the start.
Okay. Less paperwork, less intense checks.
Right.
I mean, that's a big plus for anyone dealing with visa applications.
Definitely.
But what about, the big question, the chance of actually getting the visa?
Well, the information we have suggests that this level 2 assessment directly translates to a higher chance of approval for Nepali students.
Okay.
It seems like the Australian government's confidence in students from level 2 countries really does make a difference.
They're more likely to say yes.
It seems that way.
Okay. Now, besides just getting approved, does this also affect how fast the whole application moves through the system?
Absolutely. You can expect the whole process to be quicker and less complicated.
Maybe.
You're probably going to have less back and forth with the authorities, and chances are they'll make a decision on your application faster.
So everything just moves along more smoothly.
Exactly.
Now, these country risk levels,
Yeah.
they're not set in stone, are they?
No, that's a really important point to remember. The Australian government reassesses these levels regularly. So Nepal being at level 2 right now, that reflects their current valuation of how well Nepali students are sticking to the visa rules.
So it's like an ongoing assessment.
Exactly.
It makes you think about what it's like for students from countries with, those higher risk levels.
Right.
What kind of challenges do they face?
Well, typically those students have to provide a lot more documentation,
Oh, wow.
and the scrutiny is much more intense.
So they really got to jump through hoops.
Yeah, because the government wants to be extra sure that the student is genuine and that they're going to follow the visa rules.
So for a Nepali student, level 2 is definitely a big advantage.
For sure.
But doesn't mean you could just skip all the requirements.
Right, that's right.
There's still some crucial things you got to meet.
Absolutely. Even with level 2, you still need to show that you have enough money to pay for your tuition and living expenses in Australia.
Okay.
And you still got to meet the academic requirements of the university you're applying to. And then there's English language proficiency.
Right.
You'll need to prove that you're good enough in English through standardized tests like IELTS or TOEFL.
So those are still essential.
Absolutely. Universities rely on those tests to make sure you can handle the coursework.
Okay, so level 2 makes things smoother, but the core requirements are still there.
Yeah, it's not a free pass.
So if we were to sum it all up, what's the key takeaway for Nepali students listening?
I'd say the big thing is that this level 2 assessment is a huge advantage for Nepali students who want to study in Australia.
Okay.
It simplifies the visa application, it reduces the scrutiny, and it definitely boosts your chances of actually getting to study there.
Yeah, it sounds like it really opens doors.
It does, but you got to remember those basic requirements about finances, academics, and English skills, they're still super important.
So it's like a great opportunity, but you got to be prepared.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
Like when we talk about these international assessment systems, do you ever think about how they kind of reflect the bigger picture of trust between countries?
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting.
And how much do you think a country's economic situation or social factors play into how they're perceived in these evaluations?
I'm sure that plays a role.
Right, and what kind of things could shift a country's assessment level? What could cause it to go up or down?
That's a good question.
And ultimately, how does all of this impact, international education exchange for students all over the world?
Hmm. Definitely some food for thought.
Yeah, something to ponder. Thanks for diving deep with us.
My pleasure.
And we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.